Alrighty, we are live. Mantra community, Invenium community, great to see you guys. I'm here with none other than Pat O'Meara. Pat, great to be with you here today. This is the first time we've gone live. We've done some AMAs together that were pre-recorded. This is the first live session, so we're going to get some real live give and take together, and then also with the community. And it's a good occasion to get together because we had a pretty epic last few days with the launch of NVNM Chain. But before we get into that and a lot of other interesting stuff, could you just give a quick introduction to yourself, to Invenium, and tell the Mantra community who's seen a lot of you on Twitter, what is Invenium? What have you been, how long have you been building it? What have you been doing there? And what is it all about? And how does it kind of pertain to what we're doing on the Mantra side?
Yeah,
Starting off with some applause.
Yeah, that's great. Well, first off, it's great to be with you. It's great to be with everybody in the community. Pat O'Meara, Chairman and CEO of Inveniam Capital Partners. I live in Michigan. I've spent my career in finance and technology at the intersection of both. I have worked at on Wall Street firms, Raymond James, Bear Stearns, back in the 90s. Left Bayer, started my own firm, ran that for 14 years in a very small niche. We were the globally dominant player. Sold that firm after 14 years, became chief investment officer for a university, and which is less fun than it sounds. So I left after a year, and I was helping a generation of one of the wealthier families globally with their private equity, and we had a core thesis that overregulation was going to drive a decentralization of traditional bank functions. And we said, how can we begin to make markets in this? And particularly, we were thinking lending, bank lending, and was going to be decentralized. So lots of non-bank players would get into this. So think this is 13, 14, right? And what is today private credit. And so we were looking at the technologies by which physically settled debt would become digitally settled. And we thought the markets would form there rather than around regulation or geography. And we were introduced to Bitcoin and blockchain. And so in 14 and 15, we made a series of investments. In 16, I told the family, hey, we need to kind of go all in. Every single security in the world is going to do this. I was a speaker in Miami at Bitcoin 2015. By the way, those have changed over the years dramatically. Do you know what I mean? From 300 people in a room to the crazy things that they are now. Yep. We're very interested in this because I had a core belief that every security in the world would eventually trade in this manner. And Invenium, which means to find, we have a core belief. Tim Berners-Lee, who's famously wrote a series of articles, created the World Wide Web, from CERN, did some amazing things. He wrote a series of articles called Semantic Web, and it was written kind of 3 different versions of it. In the final one, 2001, but I was managing tech portfolios when he wrote the first couple, I'm a believer in what he wrote in Semantic Web and where he talked about everybody having agents. And, he's writing this in 99, 2000, 2001, where he's talking about everybody having their own agent, everybody having total data sovereignty. And then agents are going to interact with other agents and other end compute functionality that is going to be interacting with data that you have sovereignty over and the importance of that data sovereignty. And I use that with an interaction that you saw in this book called Snow Crash, written in the 80s. From Snow Crash, everything from the metaverse came out of that. The Google Earth came out of that. The concept of an avatar came out of that. A belief in kind of where the world was going to go around payments, on top of a bunch of other stuff that I'd read on those things. And I thought this is where it's going to go. We can't have securities trading all looking for one referenceable database to rule them all, like an Edgar database for public securities or Emma for debt offerings, municipal offerings, but rather there's going to be a decentralized data architecture, particularly around private market assets. And Invenium is a decentralized data architecture. It allows you to index your data, vector embed your data, permission your data, do the management of the data operations around a private market asset. So you're not leaking that data, bleeding that data, but you can allow people to see the index of that data, and you're keeping the data for your real estate asset, your infrastructure asset, your private credit, your private equity, where it's ready for sale 24/7, 365, where you've got 24/7 surveillance, and you're keeping your asset ready for sale every single day. And what you're doing is you're creating a mechanism for there to be the memory of the condition of that asset. So if someone wants to buy it, they know the condition of that. And you have to do that without them trusting they need to trust your data, but they need to have mechanisms to trust your data. And blockchain is a mechanism to prove that how you have been maintaining that building, and not that the data is on chain, but the hash or the zero knowledge proof is of the data. Kind of think of it as a digital notary of the state of that data on any given point. And so for a big office building, I'm in a big hotel right now, and in that hotel they might have 12 to 20 systems. And what you're doing is you're anchoring the data that relates to what is the value of that asset, what is the state of entropy of that asset, are you caring for it, not caring for it. That allows you to price it, run a waterfall, carry and expense allocation, price the waterfall, do that on a daily basis. And if you can do that, where I, as the asset owner, control my own data, I have the ability for a global marketplace. And in Invenium, we are the data architecture that allows people to find their data without losing control of it. Long answer. Sorry about
Amazing.
that.
I mean, no, it's great. I mean, I think it's good to tell the story of what is Invenium and kind of how you got there, and also just like the inspiration for everything that you've been building. A couple, things to just, point out a little bit. I mean, you guys have invested heavily into a number of different interesting technical patents that are utilized within the Invenium IO software. Would you talk a little bit about that? Because it's one of the kind of the more unknown but very cool things that Invenium has, in my opinion.
Yeah, we have depending on your point of view, a large portfolio, right? We're not Qualcomm, but we have an enormous, for I think the blockchain space, one of the larger patent portfolios, and our lawyers tell us we have the most cited patent in the space around how smart contracts interact with data. And so what we're doing is we literally give you the ability to our patents talk about the ability to give data a mechanism to these are kind of some of the core fundamental patents: anchor data in a zero knowledge proof for financial instruments on multiple chains, where you use these chains also as a mechanism to be quantum resistant. This is the lattice blocks patent, and this is maybe our second most cited patent in the world on how you can use different consensus mechanisms and chains to be quantum resistant. This is one that the NSA, the DoD, and the U.S. Department of Commerce have cited in a number of their public comments. So this is a we have a series of patents, and we spent a couple $100 million building an enterprise solution set for institutions to deliver price discovery on private market assets, manage their data operations, so that eventually private market assets will be stores of value, and then you can transfer that value on chain.
Absolutely, and I think that was a good segue a little bit into the chain conversation, because obviously there was a big chain go live yesterday, an announcement last week. But could you talk a little bit about that? Because you did say that Invenium IO utilizes multiple chains, Mantra Chain being one of them, Invenium Chain being another one. Could you just tell us a little bit of that vision for the multi-chain? And actually, there was a question from the community that also said why Mantra, but we can get to that in just a bit. But I think it'd be good to just understand that kind of multi-chain vision that you have and why it's so important to have multiple chains. But I think at the same time, you've used the term with me, meta chain. So maybe just talk a little bit about that concept and how you think about that.
Yeah. So when I was at Bear Stearns in the 90s and running tech portfolios, I could tell you the difference between Owen Corning fiberglass and Northern Telecoms, and I could tell you the refraction rate, the bounce rate, the mirrors that were used, all the things for fiber optic cable. And people were laying the infrastructure for that. And as they were laying the infrastructure, what cable and what fiberglass was being used underneath the cities to connect the internet up in the late 90s mattered. Today, you not only don't know, you don't care. Do you know what I mean? The reality is you want infrastructure that works. And there's not one brand. You have multiple brands of fiber optic cable manufacturers, and you use them all, and they're all interoperable. We're going to see more value here to chains than that, certainly, because the function of finance, the function of data attestation is going to inure to certain chains, but they are going to have a need to work one with the other in this manner. And we've seen this in technology, that there needs to be a mechanism, an interface between multiple technologies and multiple hardware, the real world, between software. And this reality is, we think Invenium can be that interface between many different chains and many different real world assets that are going to trade digitally, all private market assets. And as we think about this, the reason you need multiple chains is for the simple sake of redundancy, because this is the real world. Things fail. When they fail, you need a mechanism to have a backup. And you hope that you don't ever have to use that backup, but to go out without that backup, driving without a spare tire, makes no sense. You know what I mean? And you have to have multiple chains. But in addition, when you do a data attestation, you need to have a data attestation with different forms of consensus mechanisms in order to make it quantum resistant. And so we use multiple different chains that you engage with. And also, you'd have to be a fool to think that all the markets are going to coalesce around one community and one chain. There's no way that that's going to happen. Chains are going to have different markets form up around them. Different ones are going to have, different strengths and different weaknesses. And what we're going to see is a consolidation in chains. Just like, there's been a proliferation of thousands and thousands of chains. The number of them that are all doing the exact same thing is ridiculously high. And we're going to see a consolidation. But we're going to see a consolidation where we're talking about decentralized chains, where the competition is not other decentralized chains. The competition is centralized, right? And what we're going to do, we're going to see, these coalitions, karetsus, however you want to think about them, coming together, where chains that are decentralized are going to be collaborating, right? And this is one of the reasons, JP, you and I got along so well. Our vision for the future is that Mantra was not going to be the chain that did everything for everybody. You know what I mean? And it was going to be one chain to rule them all, but rather it was going to be a chain that was excellent in the things that it did, right? And there was an opportunity for us to work together. And in that, Invenium, we want to be the data architecture for a decentralized world. And when you have forms of automation that are going to interact with data, you need mechanisms of governance for that form of automation. And the person who applies the governance comes from both sides. There's a governance from the data owner, who's going to allow that in, whether we're talking about robotic process automation, we're talking about a smart contract, we're talking about an agent, right? You need a mechanism of governance for those forms of automation. And then also from the markets side, you need that. And what we do is put a mechanism for both sides of that automation, because when a smart contract goes and gets a number that it then produces an output, a capital call, a distribution, whatever it's going to be, relating to the real world, there, you hope automation makes efficiency, but you're guaranteed lawsuits. And what we want to do is say, when that lawsuit happens, they're going to say, oh no, this form of automation, a smart contract, an agent, robotic process automation, whatever you want to talk about, but let's talk about agents and smart contracts primarily. It got the wrong data. Well, you need a mechanism for for attestation, where you say, here's the proof of origin of the data. It got it from here.
Yep.
Here's the processing of that data. We can see every step along the way. And that processing, you're proving the process, not the computation itself, because many times that's private. You know what I mean? It's going to leak proprietary data that all can't be on chain. So you have to have that proof of process and then proof of state, meaning I got this information from the June rent roll versus the May or the August, whatever. And so you have to have this proof of state, origin, and process, so that when the distribution is made and the capital call, when it pulls capital, literally you have to have a mechanism by which the courts, by which the public, by which the investor can prove that this is happening. And particularly as we get into forms of automation, right? When you're driving a horse and cart, you don't need an airbag. But when you're driving a Ferrari, you need an airbag. And when you're going at 200 miles an hour, you need an airbag, and you need guardrails, and you need lights on the highway. When you're going at 5 miles an hour, you don't with one or two assets. But when you have tens of thousands of assets that are trading and they're being surveilled real time by agents, you need a mechanism for governance and surveillance of the assets and of the agents doing the surveillance, right? And Inveniam Chain is that mechanism by which the agents that are surveilling these assets, and these are our customers. We have, some of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world as our clients and as our shareholders. And these guys have hundreds of billions of dollars, in one case, trillions of dollars of assets on their balance sheet that they're literally overseeing dozens, hundreds, thousands of physical assets, and the form of automation to surveil that, so you're not collecting data that is 6 or 9 months old, but you can suddenly get into daily surveillance of that asset. With that, you change them from buy and hold investors to buy, hold, sell, or add to position investors, because they can then get daily perspective not only on the asset, but then they can correlate that to what they think is happening in the market, and they can see where they think there's a price discrepancy, and do they want to add to it or sell to it. But no market is possible without price discovery, and price discovery for heterogeneous, meaning assets that are not alike, asset classes that are data rich and low frequency trading. That's what Invenium is solving the data solution set for. And we want to partner up with markets who want to create markets companies and markets operators who want to work with us to deliver a global order book for these types of assets. Super long answer. Sorry, JP, if I need to give.
No, it's fine. Well, if you can see the comments coming in from the community, they are pumped, and they are definitely enjoying it. So they've already requested more spaces with Pat. This man is a legend. This is another level. FOMO will kick in very soon. So people are excited, and I think you're bringing a lot of interesting insights to the community that will be very helpful and attractive to them. So that's great. Correct me if I'm wrong here. One of the big things that I think we both see as a very important part of the cycle is you have Invenium IO as this, data architecture and integrity layer. It then utilizes Inveniam Chain as this attestation layer, where you can take all these different assets that are being surveilled, agentically, make sure they're hashed on Invenium Chain, Mantra Chain, and many other chains, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, other big ones. And then you're looking to eventually tokenize these types of assets and create marketplaces around them where they can trade, where you can speculate on price, where you can borrow, collateralize, lend against them. Is that kind of the flow that you're seeing of this whole kind of ecosystem that Invenium is creating?
We got into the tokenization game in 2016. And in May of 2017, we had a fully functioning tokenization platform. We tokenized the first common equity 5 days after the Delaware law went into effect. We helped write that. We were part of those working groups. We were the first people to. We were one of, I forget if we were one of the 9 or 12 grandfathered entities in the EU for having transferred value on chain in a regulatory compliant manner ahead of the January 1, 2017 first form of regulatory compliance in Gibraltar, right? We could have gone to Malta or Gibraltar. We thought Gibraltar under FCA was much better. So we had offices in there in 16. Yep. We were tokenizing. We did the first tokenized debt arm's length transaction in February of 17. And that was a cool thing, right? We bought land where that was funded on chain. They got a mortgage. The equity was put in, the mortgage was put in, a $54 million multifamily housing complex was built. It was stabilized and it was sold, and all of the forms of finance were done on chain. And that was done in 17, right? 16 and 17. Yeah. But what we realized is, the accounting treatment for those assets killed us. No public company could have it. The accounting companies were saying there was not clear title. But in addition to that, the ongoing data reporting was horrific. And we said, okay, this is where we need to go. So we went and we did a couple things. We stopped developing the tokenization capabilities. We can do it. We've been able to create tokens forever. But that's when we bought a third of the position in Tokeny at that point. Right now, we have since sold the business. That was a great investment for us. We sold that. We brought the investor to Tokeny that bought into it. But we went and we looked around and we said, who are the best tokenization platforms? We think that this is eventually going to become a commodity, tokenization, and it's going to become a standard 100%. And interfaces. So we wanted to give that away. The value is going to be at the data side and at the market side. Everything else, AI is going to literally commoditize, right? And which tokenization platform you use, all sorts of different tools. But what we want to do is be the mechanism to correlate asset data to the token, then correlate that token to other like assets globally using large data set pattern recognition with our partner G42 to understand and do risk analytics at scale against other like assets. And one of the things that we're doing is, and JP, you know this, we're gonna be announcing later this quarter some real work, amazing work we've done with one of our big partners that collectively we've spent over 60 million, about 55 million on, where we're going to be open sourcing a language, right? That's a graph language for documents, so that not only are you index and vector embedding that document, but you're creating what's called an ontology that we think will be the base ontology for all agents to use for a data set of 5 documents or more. So normally you have an ontology, you try and apply that. But what this does is it helps you understand what's the ontology, how do people use words in this set of 5 contracts or 10 contracts or in the document set. And then you relate that to other document set, and then you create the Rosetta Stone on the fly. And this ontology problem, we have one of our partners, the creator of XML, Jean Pauli. He ran open source for Microsoft. He's going to be leading this effort for us. He's the one who got doc to docx XML form of language, where the document templates were open source completely, so that governments could use this, so that if Microsoft went under, they still had control of their files. Does that make sense? Which all of a sudden makes Microsoft from a consumer product to an enterprise product. And he's coming in where he's been working on this project for 16, 17 years. We've come in late in the game. We're partnering with him. We're going to go launch it to the market. But this is how, you're going to have a semantic chunking within the document. Then you're going to have the life cycle of the documents themselves, to the asset, to the portfolio, that correlate then to a token that represents an interest somewhere in the capital stack of a portfolio or of an asset, and then correlating that to other assets. And as we correlate that, because we've done the semantic chunking, we can do the correlation through what's called, and I hate to be too geeky here, but we're going to do it via a semantic matching versus a byte range matching. This will give us the performance to match private market data with other encrypted private market data at the edge at a level that is not possible than anybody else. And the performance numbers are in multiples of 10x better than any byte range correlation, and through the semantic matching. There's 17 years of work and $50 million. We're going to start open sourcing that we want every RWA chain in the world to be using. We want every agent in the world using that as they interface with unstructured data. So if we have a mechanism for an ontology, we have a mechanism for an agent to then anchor that on chain, Inveniam Chain, built for those agents, then literally we can surveil the asset, we correlate that to a token, we correlate that token to other like assets around the world, and then that can trade on any large marketplace for private markets around the world 24/7, 365. When we do that, MasterCard, one of our big partners, you can literally attach your MasterCard to a portfolio of multifamily housing, and you're going to buy your latte with that, and you're not even going to interface with the bank at all. You're going to literally do that. And when that happens, why am I storing money in a bank instead of a portfolio of multifamily housing or light industrial warehouses or CRE or private credit that's actually yielding real assets that are yielding cash, and you don't have intermediaries that are sitting on top of a fractional reserve banking structure that worked for 800 years, but right now there's more risk than there is benefit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's it's a big vision, and I think we're excited to be part of that vision and how we can build that out together. To talk a little bit about Inveniam Chain. So, last week it was announced at Consensus. Bill Papp was on a panel at Consensus in Miami last week and announced the launch coming this week. And we're sitting here today, Thursday, May 14th. It went live yesterday on Wednesday. Super excited about that. Obviously, the birth of a chain is really just the tipping point, the beginning, and there's still a long way to go in terms of developing the ecosystem. But I do want to kind of touch on a couple of the key elements to what the chain is and how it's functioning and whatnot. The first being it is an L2 on Mantra Chain, so it's the first layer 2 on Mantra, which we're super excited about. So it utilizes partial set security on Mantra Chain L1, and what this means is that because it inherits the security of the Mantra Chain, it actually just uses a particular part of the validator set to validate transactions both on Mantra Chain as well as on Inveniam Chain. But what this means for Mantra holders and stakers is that if you're staking to one of the nodes that validates transactions on Mantra and Inveniam Chain, effectively you're going to be getting double rewards. And that means you're going to get your staking rewards from being a delegator on Mantra, but also because Inveniam Chain utilizes Mantra USD as gas. So we made a design choice to use a stablecoin as a gas token, and maybe we'll touch on that in just a bit, Pat, because I think there's some real world agentic reasons for why we would do that. But it also means that those transaction fees are going to get paid in Mantra USD to stakers. So you're actually able to both get like legitimately cash equivalents and Mantra tokens for staking to one of the nodes, an Inveniam node or a Mantra node that is validating both of those chains. So that's, I think, pretty exciting. And obviously, as more transactions and more use cases and more things get developed on Inveniam Chain, which we have some pretty exciting and big stuff in the works, those transaction fees, while remain cheap at the individual transaction level, overall they can be some pretty big numbers. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of transactions, which can generate some solid rewards. So maybe just all that being said, could you just maybe give a little bit of thought on stablecoin as gas, some of these big use cases that you've been developing, and generally how you see the ecosystem development of Inveniam Chain going?
Yeah, sure. So we, I think we have two sovereign wealth funds as shareholders of Inveniam, also as clients and partners. We have the largest servicer of real estate in the world as one of our shareholders and partners. And what we're doing with them is helping them administer their data where it's not manual, where it's automated, and where they've got proof of origin, state, and process. And that proof of origin, state, and process is using zero knowledge proofs on chain, right? And these proofs that are on chain help them prove to third parties the state of their asset, the condition of that asset, and where they're going to trade. The function of that is being done using smart contracts. And this smart contract that is going to be able to write to chain, first and foremost, the this chain speaks the native language via MCP of an agent itself, right? So it's there. And so these agents can prove origin, process, and state of data, not just in financial markets, but in all markets where they can do this. So this is a chain native for agents, right? That you can prove you have got attestation of this proof of origin, process, and state of data in a decentralized architecture. And this is incredibly important. And we are the meta chain, JP, as you brought up, which is the first chain that they're going to write to. Now, every other chain that they're going to write to, they're going to write to because there's an instrument on that chain that relates to the asset that they're speaking to. Now, when you do that, you literally have to go make a call to a smart contract, and that smart contract writes, instead of the agent having the ability to write natively directly to the chain. And the reason we're doing this is so that we can be doing high volume writing. I'll give an example. RTE compliance for high throughput output chips, high performance chips is governed by the U.S. Department of Commerce, and they have this RTE compliance, and you need to prove what is the data coming in, what is the data doing within the chip, and then what is the output, and how is it being utilized. So to do that, you need an agent that's literally looking at the bare metal of what's happening in the chip, and those attestations are being written and they're being hashed into a Merkle tree, and then the root of that Merkle tree is being written to the chain. This is important for what these type 2 countries, right? So the UAE, where we have a lot of presence, we have offices there, big shareholders and clients there, Saudi Arabia, India, these clients, for them to get these high performance NVIDIA chips, as an example, they need to prove RTE compliance. Well, in the paper where the U.S. Department of Commerce cited the types of compliance mechanisms that they would accept, they actually cited our patent, right? And so we're going in and we're saying, this is a tool. We think we will get literally billions of hashes a year just from one of our clients on this, where they're proving how their high performance chips are processing the data in a zero knowledge manner on a public chain. And this is what we're doing. So this is an example of high volume. They need to be able to budget for that. They need to be able to see that there's not inflation in the cost of that anchoring. I will tell you, the first time, I remember this in 2017, I anchored a smart contract onto Ethereum, and it cost me more than a penny, and I was pissed. I was like, this cannot stand. We can't have a transaction costing more than a penny on Ethereum. Then it quickly went to 3 cents and whatever. The last time I anchored an Ethereum contract, the high functioning, group of contracts, smart contracts onto Ethereum, it cost me $5,200. You cannot operate that way. You know what I mean? And corporations can't. So this is why we're using that a mechanism that will not be inflating, other than the inflation of the native currency. Does that make sense? That the company's budgeted. So this is why we're doing it. That's an example of one that we're doing. But we're dealing with upstream and midstream oil companies using agents to surveil their sensors, and they need to provide the proof of when and where exactly during the runtime, not after the fact, during the runtime of the processing of where they found the error, so that they can come in and pinpoint on the sensors which ones are doing it, and then remediate these. And the benefit of these for these oil companies are huge. And we've got a number of partners that are with us that we're looking at kind of 5 main verticals, that one of our biggest partners is working with, that where the agentic surveillance is coming in, where they're going to be anchoring on Inveniam Chain. But this is energy, food, this horrible healthcare. I can't believe it. Anyway, we'll put it out there in the notes after the fact.
No problem.
But I'm having that senior moment. But anyway, but these are the verticals that they're doing. And I'm gonna now obsess about that in a minute. But anyway, JP, but these are the examples where we literally think that there will be high volume anchoring by agents that are proving process at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Katie Orhan. Billions of hashes in Mantra USD. Do the math. I think that is an exciting proposition for the community, for stakers. But another one that I know that they are very excited about as well is NVNM, the token. Obviously, still a lot of work to go into that, and not a lot of information out in the world about that yet. But one thing that is coming out soon is NVNM points. So that's a system where you can go and do a number of things on the chain that are valuable to the ecosystem, including attesting data, having your agents attest different sorts of information, hash to the chain, do KYA, which is know your agent, which effectively is a new idea of effectively connecting different agents to a real world identity that allow you to manage and control these agents, attesting data on Inveniam Chain, and do all these things to get used to actually integrating and working on Inveniam Chain now that it's launched into mainnet. So that will be the precursor to NVNM, the token, going live. We have a lot of additional information around tokenomics, upcoming TG in the future. It's not that close, but it's coming, and we're excited about that. But for the meantime, be on the lookout for NVNM Chain points. That should be out in the next week or so, and that's where you can really start interacting with the chain, with agents on Inveniam Chain, and attesting data. So it'll give you a feel of what Pat is talking about. Obviously, Pat's talking about this attestation and hashing being done at massive scale. But we would appreciate any of our community members to go out and test it as well. Any scale you can bring to the table is important to us.
Yeah, and I've seen a couple of comments. So the answer is all of these verticals will be anchoring data to Inveniam Chain. Their agents that are surveying these, so they will be using. We're talking our official launch partners as we launch over the next 3 to 4 months, various different use cases that go live, and these are quite large companies that we've been working with for a long time. Some of them are have been customers for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Some of them are partners, some of them are shareholders, and all of them are clients of Invenium. So this is what we're doing. And I wanted to say maybe 2 things, if I can, JP. We made a decision to partner with Mantra post the drop in your the OHM token and the attack against you guys, and we made that decision because you guys had built great tech, and the product and the value that we saw in the token and in the chain and in what you do compared to the price was asymmetric. And so that's why we came in. The more we lean in, the more we like, the more we're going to do. And the reality is the market will never be wrong for too long. Does that make sense? And what that means is I don't know how long, the price is going to be wrong, but we don't care because we're building and we're deploying real money at scale, building real tech with a real partner, JP, you and your entire team, right? Prof K, Matt Crooks, Steven, you guys have an amazing team that we are glad to be partners with. And the reality is time will tell correctly. And the reason that we did this with Mantra, initially we were introduced because of some of our partners in the UAE who asked us to take a close look. And the reality is we are going to do more with you guys, not less over time. We are leaning into this relationship. We are building institutional grade solutions. We are not building memes. We're building institutional grade solutions that we seek to be the base layer for this agentic financial world that is coming. And this is why we partnered with you. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of answering something that was in the comments, not necessarily what was put on the screen. Sorry about that.
No worries. No, it's perfect. Yeah, honestly, that's almost the perfect mic drop moment. We're very excited that we were able to connect with you guys in a time of need, and very appreciative of yourself and all the Invenium team members for coming in and supporting us and being a great partner throughout it's been almost a year now. We've been working through our initial deal for a few months, but getting to know each other has been great, and actually putting together real world use cases into fruition, like Inveniam Chain, is a great start to a long term relationship where we like to do long term things with long term people, and we definitely feel that with the Inveniam team and yourself, and the partners that you guys have built up, and it is truly incredible to see what you guys have done. I mean, you've been doing this for over 10 years now. I think Invenium's been going on, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're 10 years old this year, 2026. January 1, 2016 is when we January 1, 2017 is when we emerged as this form of a company. We existed with a couple of partners for about 2 years, 2015 and 16, yep, where we were making kind of prop bets, off of our own balance sheet. I had some partners, we bought them out, and then we said, okay, we're going to go full on this data side. And
yep,
and this is, we're super excited to be partnered with you. We bring to you, I think, a good institutional private markets ecosystem, and some good tech and some great partners. But boy, you bring so much to us, and your knowledge, the depth of your knowledge, who you guys are in the midst of a tough time, and then keeping your head down, building. And the reality is, this is going to play out the right way. And the more we work with you, the more we like. But I think be on the lookout, to make a couple hints. We have some of the largest markets players in the world. We have some of the largest asset managers in the world using our tools, who are going to be starting to use Mantra Chain at scale. We're going to come in and an Inveniam chain, I should say. And then, that rolls up into Mantra Chain. And then as these markets develop, we're going to be leaning in. And I have to tell you, one of the last things that I want to make a comment on is Mantra FCE. It matters. You know what I mean? How you've thought about doing this, going about it the right way, gives people confidence that this is where real infrastructure is going to be built. So we're super excited, but be on the lookout for some of these announcements of not only our partners, but as we launch this document graph markup language that we're going to be open sourcing.
Absolutely. I think that's probably a good way to wrap it up a little bit, but I guess just to give a little bit of additional alpha on what's coming. I mean, it sounds like there's some really interesting key partnerships and use cases coming on the Invenium side, on Inveniam Chain. You alluded to Mantra Finance FCE, which is the Vara entity. Perps are coming imminently. That's one of the key product launches that's just around the corner. Actually, some of the community members have already started testing it. And, one of the things that we're thinking of doing is giving some early access passes to some of the best questions from today. So there's a few that, had some good questions in the comments, and a few that had asked them here. We'll pick these out, and we'll reach out directly and get you guys access to test out the Perps app. It is a mobile as well as a web-based application. So you guys will be able to check it out, share a little bit more about what you think, give us some feedback, and we'll make sure to get that built up and shipped out quickly, agentically, and efficiently. So I think on that note, please, Pat, please.
Maybe one other question that I saw go 2 or 3 times was about Invenium token, and even you mentioned it, right? We're going to be launching that. We're probably in the near term going to be announcing right. You noticed the white paper, didn't mention anything about that at all. We have a whole other set of documents that we're creating along that side that we're going to be going to market with. So we do think that that's going to be a meaningful part of what we do, and we will share all that information in a fulsome way when it's ready. But I think that this summer there's going to be a lot coming out as we get ready for that launch.
100%. A lot of work, a lot of interesting announcements. It's definitely not going to be a dull summer for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. Well, Pat, I know you're a very, very busy man, so I appreciate you giving the community and myself 45 minutes of your time. Normally, we only do 30 minutes for these community connects, so gave the community a little bit extra today, but I think it was definitely worth it. And hopefully, everyone really enjoyed hearing from Pat, hearing a little bit more about Invenium's story, Invenium Chain's vision, well, actually the vision for Invenium and this future world of private market assets that you're tokenizing and agentically utilizing. It's an exciting world, and we really just appreciate your time today. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Pat. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks everyone.
God bless. Bye-bye.